In 50 years of gardening for a living, I've met every kind of gardener.
And seen almost every kind of garden.
Oh, that's my favourite thing, edges and straight lines. I love it.
And the thing I know for certain is that away from the grand estates,
it's the private back gardens of Britain that really tell the story of our nation's gardening obsession.
So for the first time, I'm taking you over the hedge and through the gates of Britain's regular backyards to share my 30 favourite outdoor spaces.
That is amazing.
Well, you should come when it's looking good.
I liken our relationship to a compost heap.
We get quite hot.
Watch. Large, small, simple, high maintenance, you name it.
These are Britain's best back gardens. The search for Britain's best gardens is taking me all over the country. I've sifted through 600 nominations to choose my personal favourites. What I'm discovering is that there are as many different types of back garden as there are people. And narrowing it down to the final 30 is a near impossible task.
But there's more to some gardens than meets the eye. They can have a greater purpose.
So in tonight's show, I'm celebrating the 10 very different gardens that do more than just look pretty. I've picked my top hard-working outdoor spaces, private gardens that feed, entertain, and even make money. Kicking off my top 10, I'm heading to Yorkshire, and to really experience the magic of this first hard-working garden, I have to stay overnight. From its humble beginnings, the Great British B&B has really come up in the world. These days, it's very much Egyptian cotton sheets, elegant surroundings, and gourmet breakfasts.
But this isn't just a B&B. This is a BB&G.
Set in the pretty town of Richmond in North Yorkshire, this B&B is as popular for its beautiful private garden as it is for its view of the Yorkshire countryside, and their guests can't get enough of it.
When they come, they just go straight in and look down to the garden because it's just lovely to just look down into it. It's an real added attraction.
The gardening-obsessed owners, Tim and Austin, who were lucky enough to call this place home, met over 40 years ago and have created a secluded garden for them and their B&B guests to enjoy. It makes my top 10 because of the wild and woolly planting that's on just the right side of romantic mayhem.
I came last night, so dark, tantalising, wonderful large Georgian windows, thinking, I've heard about this garden, what's on the other side? And then you look out of it and it sort of falls away underneath.
Yeah, we're very fortunate. It's glorious, gorgeous position. And in the morning, to be able to wake up when there's nobody in the garden, wander out by yourself is such a joy.
As I did this morning, whilst completing my ablutions, I peeped out the window and I saw you down there with a pair of secateurs snipping dead heads off a pink.
Well, I knew you were going to be looking, and you'd have an eye for any imperfections.
No, I don't.
And get it right. You okay with the dog, though?
I'm very happy with the dog. The dog's very interested in my sausage. Austin, good morning. They said I'd find you here, working hard.
Hi, how are you?
I'm all right, how are you? What? It's quite a slope, isn't it?
Hell of a slope. It's quite a challenge, actually. Yeah.
You've got lots of things in here. Roses feature an awful lot. I mean, it's clearly a rose garden, shrub rose garden.
Yeah. And the roses this summer have been, I don't think in a lifetime we'll ever see them as good.
What did you do before you ran a B&B?
Well, we were school teachers, so we worked together all our working lives, played together, gardened together, and we're still together, which is quite an achievement.
Austin might be in his late 60s, but in garden and dress, he prefers more of a wild, rebellious look.
I'm pretty anarchic, and was an anarchic teacher, as you can imagine, a bit naughty, an anarchic gardener, and I like the idea of controlled chaos, controlled anarchy.
But don't you think too many people today want to replicate the order and form and the unchangingness of a sitting room? They want to lay it out and it not to alter, and they want it to be hard lines and no billowing
absolutely,
bands.
yeah, absolutely. An ex-student actually was in the garden last week, and she said to me, looking at this garden this morning, I need to loosen my corset. She said, I've been too tight. What you've taught me this morning is do your own thing.
Do what suits you and loosen your corset.
Yeah, loosen your corset.
Like most of us, I've stayed in a few B&Bs in my time, and they've varied enormously. But this is astonishing. It's not just BB&G, it's BB and GG. Glorious garden.
Tim and Austin's back garden is a lure for their guests, but for centuries we've used our personal plots for all sorts of things. Wealthy Victorians had a mania for plant collections. They hired plant hunters to seek out rare species. They brought hostas from Southeast Asia, and a Victorian favourite, the orchid. When they got them, they used their grand gardens as trophy cases to show them off. And some of us are still doing exactly the same in our backyards. Before I reveal garden number 9 on my list, let me introduce you to Mike King, an obsessive modern-day plant hunter.
For me, it's a bit like collecting stamps. You've got to have every single one.
Mike King's back garden in Telford is almost entirely devoted to a particular plant passion.
I basically collect 2 types of carnivorous plants. The Venus flytraps and, to a much larger extent, Sarracenia pitcher plants.
His 6 large greenhouses hold 1,200 different plants and take up pretty much the entire garden.
I've gone as far as I can here. Do we move house and have a larger collection? Probably. I'll just take more time off from work.
Space might be tight, but up and down the land, it doesn't stop us stuffing our backyards with the unusual. But for a plant collection that's truly a feast for the senses, you have to head to Rayleigh in Essex. This is the garden of Heather and Harry Brickwood.
I think most people enjoy being in the garden because they relax. Heather and I are rather different. We don't. We come out here to work.
At first glance, this may look like your typical cottage garden, but on closer inspection, there's a bit of a theme. Lilies. A whopping 2,500 of them.
When I was going to start lilies, I didn't obviously know anything about them, and I just bought a few, planted them, and to my delight, they grew beautifully.
And he just bought more and more and more. Okay, so they're not ever so long lived, but they are beautiful, and that's what he likes.
Like a lot of happy gardening couples, one of them is a bit keener on it than the other.
I love doing gardening. It's something at the moment I could not live without.
Harry is the gardener. It's his idea. It's what he likes to put in. It's all Harry. I can go down and say, isn't that lovely? Doesn't go down too well if I say, oh, don't like that, you know, but so that is good.
I picked this garden for my list because it's a triple whammy. Not only does it have a classic collection of lilies in an impeccable garden, but Harry and Heather also use it to raise pots of cash for charity. Like over 3,000 gardens across the country, they open it up to the public with the National Garden Scheme.
Welcome to Orchard Cottage. A lot of you have probably come to see the lilies. We started opening our garden 11 years ago, and in that time we have raised in excess of £20,000.
The very first time we opened, it was such hard work. I said to Harry, couldn't we just send them a cheque instead, because it's all for the cancer, Macmillan nurses, etc. So he said, yes, but how much pleasure would it give other people? So I said, well, you know, so he's right. Open your garden, show other people what you've got.
Did you make the cakes?
Yes, I did.
Oh, they're delicious, lovely.
Thank you very much. It's very tiring, but you meet some really nice people, even though when you're doing it, you think, crumbs.
But could this couple imagine life without a garden?
Yes.
No?
We'll agree to differ then. Coming up, I'm turning Japanese in Lincolnshire. I'm counting down my favourite hard-working back gardens, and at number 8 is a breathtaking backyard workspace that I honestly wouldn't believe was real if I hadn't seen it for myself. Meditation guru Buddha Maitreya arrived in the rural village of North Clifton 40 years ago. His house came with a bit of land, so he turned his old pig farm into this.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Wonderful. Wonderful. Wonderful.
With no horticultural training, Maitreya set about converting 2 flat fields into a fabulous Japanese garden as a sanctuary for him to teach meditation.
You're creating amazing pictures here. Everywhere I look, there's a view, but this is a case of I can't go back to Japan, or I'm not going back to Japan, so I'll bring Japan here.
I miss Japan living in this flat area. Japanese garden, in my sense, is a miniature of the natural landscape of Japan. 85% of Japan is mountain. Mountain, waterfalls, bridges, pond, rivers. I try to make some little Japan here.
Maitreya created this undulating terrain, bringing a bit of his homeland to the flatlands, and then carefully planted and pruned in an unmistakable Japanese style.
I simply love these stepping stones raised up out of the water and leading to a bamboo. Now, I like cleaning the stems of my bamboos, but here the stems have been cleaned halfway, then thinned, and those that come out of the top cleaned again. So you get this kind of tiered effect on this bamboo, cloud-pruned trees everywhere, and these wonderful Japanese palms. They're not, you know. That's Leyland cypress.
The longer I look, the more of this Japanese garden seems to be full of quirky Anglo-Japanese surprises.
I love your sort of Mary Poppins umbrella there. There's an ordinary cypress. You've taken all the bottom branches up, so you've got these kind of spokes of an umbrella, and the umbrella on the top. It's beautiful.
This takes 2-3 years to make it as if it's natural.
Always little tiny Japanese shears that you snip away with, is that right?
Not really. I use modern powerful electric shears.
My illusion is shattered.
The reason I picked Maitreya's garden is that it's so inventive. It's a workspace that needs to be calm and in perfect balance. So the Japanese style is perfect. But how Maitreya's achieved it, with little more than hard work and a joyful enthusiasm, feels miraculous.
There is a great stillness. I mean, you stand in any spot, and somehow there's an intensity to the silence in here.
Yes, I'm very grateful to hear such expression, because that's what I teach, that's what everyone should notice. So in that sense, I'm helping people to awaken to this inner beauty, inner peace. That is the essence of my garden.
OK, Maitreya, I'm waking up to my inner beauty. It may take me a while.
Outside is very beautiful.
You'll find little touches of Japan in gardens all over Britain, whether it's a Japanese maple in a pot or a little arched bridge over a pond. Why do we do it? Well, we do it because they're elegant, but also
because they provide us with peace and serenity. And you get that here in spades. And breathe. A sanctuary of peace and quiet in our backyards is perhaps the ideal. But the reality for most of us is this. Our precious patch of outdoor space is given over to the greater purpose of entertaining our children. So when I found a regular-sized plot that kept the whole family happy without looking like a plastic playpen, well, it had to go on my list, didn't it?
I wanted to design a garden that was going to be for the whole family. We've got 2 young kids. We didn't want it to feel like a garden that had just been given over to the children.
Lucy Wilcox designs gardens for a living. But like a lot of us, her own garden couldn't just be a flight of fancy.
It's actually quite a hard-working garden. It's a small space. Every centimetre really counts. I didn't want to have any fixed play structures in the space. I wanted them to be able to have sort of free play within the space. So if they want to put a tent up in one space, or they want to use another bit for a train set, and equally if we want a bit of peace and quiet, we can sit in one space and we're not getting in each other's ways. But one thing I did want to provide them was somewhere that was a space that they could call their own. So I designed a small playhouse, something that will grow with them as well. At the moment it's got a little kitchen in it. When they're teenagers, they can chuck a couple of beanbags in there and it can just be their little zone.
I love the way Lucy's garden puts her children's need to play and enjoy the outdoors first, without compromising on beautiful bedding and plants.
The temptation in a small urban garden is to have really narrow beds on either side and a big lawn down the middle, which means that you just get really skinny beds and you can never do anything exciting in them.
But they're still fun for the big kids too.
My husband is a very keen golfer, and so I thought to keep him happy I put a little putting green in the garden too.
The eagle-eyed among you may have noticed Lucy's lawn was artificial. That's not something every gardener would approve of. So, before I reveal a personal plot where the freshly cut lawn is king, let me explain how the perfect square of trimmed turf came to be such an obsession. When the gentry in the 18th century wanted beautiful lawns, they had to hire a bunch of burly men with scythes. It was expensive, but that didn't matter. A smart, sheep-free lawn was a mark of your wealth. It was Regency bling. And when the mechanised lawnmower arrived in the 1830s, those dedicated scythers, well, they weren't happy.
When the mower was invented, you only needed one man, or one man and a pony, or something like that. And so they used to go around on a night and smash the mowers, just to keep themselves in work.
The scythers were fighting a losing battle, and the lawnmower took over. And for some reason, men like Stan Hardwick and his son Jonathan have loved them ever since.
I like them all. They're brilliant.
Stan has a collection of over 400 of them, and one of his favourites is this model.
It's an exact replica of the first mower ever made. And it's a two-man mower. The original one was made in 1830.
The manual lawnmower was still a bulky, complicated machine until this model made things a good deal simpler.
This one is one of the first side-wheel mowers ever produced. It was patented in 1869. Made a lot cheaper than the other bigger ones, so as more people could afford it. And more people could have pretty lawns, really. It's called a Climax. I don't know why they called it that, really, because it's so exciting.
As with all things with men, size seemed to matter. So when the lawnmower was motorised in 1902, with this nifty ride-on model being a snip at the equivalent of £15,000, the blokish devotion to lawn cutting was seen.
I do like the larger machines. The sort of the sports ground machines and the heavy sit-on machines. I think they're my favourite type of mowers.
So it might be a stereotype, but a very recent survey revealed that in 70% of marriages, it's still the man who cuts the grass. Emily and Andrew Moore are a case in point. They've gardened together for all of their 55-year marriage. But their immaculate plot in Ayrshire is an object lesson in the art of horticultural compromise. This hard-working backyard is on my list because it's so very carefully laid out to satisfy two very different gardening passions.
Andrew, I have been gardening for 50 years. I have never seen or set foot
Is that true?
on a lawn like this.
Oh, that's great.
Were you in the army?
I was in the Air Force.
Oh, straight lines, you know,
Yes,
ranks of men.
from here to there.
Andrew's regimental turf won him Scotland's best lawn in 2013.
How long to create a lawn like this?
Well, it was actually part of the field, this.
It was part of the field?
Uh-huh. We had ponies in it and that, and we just keep cutting it, and it comes up like this.
For how many years?
Over the years. Every morning I cut it.
For how many years?
Oh, for many years, 30 years.
30?
Aye.
Every morning for 30 years you cut this grass?
Women say to me once, how often do you cut your grass? Every day. And what do you do when it's raining? So I put my coat on.
But if you're mowing this every morning, when do you get a holiday?
Oh, I've never been on holiday. About 43 years ago since I was on holiday.
No.
Aye, true.
Now, most lawnmowers, they have 5 or 6 blades in the cylinder.
Yes.
And the more blades you get, the finer the cut.
The finer the cut you get.
How many blades in your cylinder?
12 cutting edges and that, and that's how to get a nice lawn.
This is a Rolls-Royce of a lawn.
That's what it is, yes, the Rolls-Royce.
We should say that the stripes come as a result of the roller,
yes,
which is pushing the grass down. So when you're looking at it, the dark stripe is the grass lying towards
That's
you,
it,
and the
yes.
light stripe, it's lying away. But the edges, they're like a
Oh,
razor.
that's my favourite thing, edges and straight lines. I love it.
What do you cut them with? Because it's as if that's been sliced down with a pastry knife.
I've got a wee machine that cuts it, an edging machine, a Ryobi, and it's got a blade in it, and you just walk along the edge quite quick too, and it just cuts it. As long as you walk straight, makes a great job.
You can't do it when you've had a few?
No, I had to stop drinking when I started doing the edges.
But just when you think you've got the measure of this garden with its striped lawns and its quite regimented bedding, you walk round a corner into a garden that looks like this. His and hers. Emily.
Hello.
The other half. The other half of the garden, too.
Emily's passion is for perennial bedding and softer, naturalistic planting, and she's good at it.
Emily, this is absolutely beautiful. Astilbes, these great wafts of pink, and the ligularias. Glorious.
Yes,
so this is your style of gardening?
This is my style of gardening, yes.
Your lawn here isn't striped like Andrew's lawn.
We don't want it striped here. He would love to come round here and have it striped, but no way is he going to have it striped round here.
So if you see him edging around there with his 12-blade...
Oh, he's had it.
He's had it.
The fork.
Andrew, be very careful. I wouldn't want you perforated. So he won this prize, the best lawn in Scotland and the runner-up in Britain. I mean, I've never seen anything better than that.
It's quite good, isn't it?
Were you a bit proud of him?
Oh, yes. Of course.
You tell him?
No.
If ever you wanted to see a garden that exemplified the fact that men are from Mars and women are from Venus, then this is it. The man, straight lines on the lawn, bright, bold, leery bedding, she, soft, feminine plantings. But the funny thing is that the one shows off the other, and they can live happily side by side, most of the time.
Coming up, my top 5. In this episode, I've been searching for private gardens that aren't just frivolous flights of fancy, but have a real purpose behind them. Kitchen gardens fit the bill perfectly, but the one I've picked for my top 10 is a lifeline for its owner.
I pick my lunch and pick my supper twice a day, every single day of the year.
Former Michelin-starred chef Richard Sanford's organic fruit and veg garden really was a matter of life and death.
8 years ago, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and that's when I felt that changing to being a vegan and growing all my own vegetables would prolong my life and would help me.
Richard's cancer diagnosis was of an aggressive form, and at the time, he was told he may have only 2 years left to live. With absolutely zero use of chemicals, it's Richard's gardening know-how that ensures his Berkshire kitchen garden is as healthy and pest-free as this. It's bursting with goodness.
Being organic to me is growing plants really well and in the right environment, so you have the right pH, the right amount of sun, and if you get the conditions that they want to grow in, they'll grow really well, and then they'll fight the bugs and pests that most gardeners suffer from, so that you don't need to use the sprays.
This is definitely no ordinary veg plot. Richard concentrates on growing fruit and veg with cancer-fighting properties.
Things that are red have more antioxidants in them, things that don't. Tomatoes, chilies, beetroot, carrots.
It's impossible to say for sure that Richard's diet and lifestyle has inhibited the progress of his cancer. But Richard is convinced that his magnificent veg plot is playing a vital role, and that, for me, gets his ultra-organic kitchen garden in my top 10.
I really feel that the benefit to my mind and my life has been enormous.
Growing fruit and veg is one obvious way that our garden can reward us. But in my next hard-working garden,
there's no veg plot, but there is a tremendous harvest of produce.
I've come to York to meet a grand master of floral art.
There you are, lovely to see you.
Welcome to Heslington.
Thank you.
Testament to 60 years of working artistically with flowers and foliage, George Smith's garden is simply gorgeous. It's very much a working garden, but it's my number 4 because it's full of character. George's character.
In a way, it's slightly theatrical, which I suppose is like me. It's a garden of entrances and exits. So there's a certain element of surprise.
There's more than a certain element. That is amazing.
Well, thank you.
But so much colour for late summer. I mean, it's still incredibly
Well, you should
vibrant.
come when it's looking good.
George's glorious hot bed is full of flowers that he uses in his arrangements, all artfully put together with an expert's eye. He was awarded the MBE for his services to flower arranging, and even counts the late Princess Grace of Monaco as a former student of his.
Well, in a sense, it's a living flower arrangement, isn't it?
It's beautifully tiered. You've got the drifts going into one another. You've got these wonderful verticals from the lobelia and these enormous great yellow daisies here.
Yes, you've got colour, form and texture. The 3 things that a flower arranger thinks about all the time. But you do it in your garden. And we don't want a sort of catafalque effect, do we?
So you're bringing some tall stuff to the front?
Deliberately.
Yeah, I like this kind of cheating. Your canna there is in a pot.
Shh, don't tell anybody. That's a bit of Botox. that was just dropped in hours before you came.
But it's from here.
George may call it Botox. I call it a neat trick. And as a flower arranger, he's got plenty more.
This is all pots and astonishingly effective.
Each thing can be moved about.
Yeah.
You can do a lot of stage set.
You can change the scenery.
Cheating.
When did you start flower arranging then?
Well, I began in the army.
Now, there aren't many people who say, I started flower arranging in the army.
Well, I'm like you, Alan. I've had the most incredibly lucky life. The General's wife came to inspect our lines, and they said, you've got to keep out of the way because she's not fulfilling any purpose. And I said, well, before I go, let me just make a flower arrangement to make it welcome to her. And she walked past the receiving line. She said, "Who did that?" And they said, "Well, Sergeant Smith, but you know, he's National Service. You won't be meeting him." She said, "Well, I'd rather like to." And she said, "You come and do my flowers at the General's residence." Well, I was untouchable then. You know, I was the white-haired boy because I always had a cocktail party to do. I couldn't go on weapon training.
And the rest, as they say. Now, this garden is also, in effect, your workshop. I mean, it's your source material, so the flowers, as well as presumably from the florist, come out of here.
Yes, well, everybody can buy flowers, but you can't always buy leaves, can you? In a way, I am growing to pick. So I think it would be good for you to have a little masterclass from George.
I've been ambushed here.
Aha. This is a lovely slender reed mace from the pond just outside there.
And so begins my lesson in the classic triangular flower arrangement, for which George is famous. No hand-tied bunches here.
It's always a good idea to cut and measure and then cut again. Now I'll just show you how each flower has air around it. It's not crowded, there is space. Well, now that is absolutely terrific, I must say. What's intriguing is we had exactly the same amount of plant material, and yet yours looks so much fuller.
You see, this is fascinating. Your spacing is wonderful. They're all beautifully shown off.
But you've had lesson number 1, so I take my hat off to you. You have lots of potential.
I've really enjoyed it. Do you still get as great a kick out of flower arranging today as you ever did?
Always. It's a blissful moment. It's not the career I would have chosen, but it's the one I wouldn't have missed.
Oh.
It's time to introduce my backyard top 3, with a contemporary garden designed for pure entertainment. But before I do, let me reveal where our love of outdoor partying began. In the grand picturesque landscape gardens of the 18th century, like Stowe, the designers built fantastic follies and buildings in the grounds to host some very wild parties with scandalous results.
There is evidence of amorous liaisons in gardens from divorce cases. One particularly scandalous case involved the lady of the house meeting her groom at a secluded spot which was called the Bathing Well, a sort of private swimming pool in the gardens. The groom and the lady of the house disappeared inside and conclusions were drawn. The po-faced Victorians liked to pretend there was nothing going on in the garden, but by the 1920s, the bright young things took debauchery in the garden to new heights. Cecil Beaton's photographs show the bright young things partying at Wilsford Manor. They were all dressed up and they were all having affairs.
Fast forward to the 60s, and the grounds of Cliveden in Buckinghamshire, and the garden entertaining was still in full flow. In 1961, around this very pool, a saucy soirée had very steamy consequences. Party girl Christine Keeler met John Profumo, a married Conservative minister, and so began the scandal of the decade. So the next time you're throwing a fun barbecue, you might want to rope off that area behind the shed. Or not. There are no such shenanigans in my next garden, but hang on to your wallets, it's a posh one. With a background in hospitality, Alison and Kevin Davis have a garden in Dorset that's perfect for entertaining in real style.
I never cook anything in this house, being married to a chef, but barbecue is the only cooking I ever do.
They are amazing hosts, wonderful hosts.
The whole concept was just to create another room, and that's what it does, because, you know, I sweep it up, I hoover it, and I dust it, and it's our other room, it's our summer room.
Creating an outdoor room is never normally my thing, but Alison and Kevin's garden's different. It's more like a private luxury yacht. It makes you feel special. It says, kick off your shoes, step on board, let's have fun.
And when we have lovely weather like this, it comes into its own.
White limestone is fringed with box hedging and softened by elegant specimen trees which pull the whole garden together and, for me, make this a magical, entertaining space.
The trees are really pretty with the multiple branches, and in the evening the lights come on and I think it gives it a lovely feel.
Concealed lighting and outdoor speakers for music set the tone, but the fire pit is Alison's favourite nighttime feature.
I definitely think it is essential if you're going to entertain a lot. It creates a totally different atmosphere, and I like it when the lights are on.
Coming up, it's my top 2. For most of us, the back garden is the focus of our gardening dreams and aspirations. But it wasn't always like that. In post-war Britain, as the number of British homeowners increased, the front garden became a place for us to express pride in our new property. Streets across the land were adorned with neatly cut hedges and blooming rose bushes. So with that in mind, I'm going to break my own rule here and pick a hard-working front garden that's all about putting the little town of Usk in South Wales on the map.
Usk has been very, very successful since we started, actually, Usk in Bloom back in 1981. We entered that year and came second, and Wales in Bloom, we've come first for the next 32 years in a row.
Pubs and businesses invest in a mass floral brightening of the public spaces, and although local residents transform their front gardens too, no one does it quite like Usk-born Marion Powell. Marion's front garden is a little land of wonder. An explosion of Technicolor annuals make it an eye-popping work of art.
The front garden, I put baskets up. There's not that many baskets, although it looks like a wall of flowers. I just like a very colourful garden. And I mainly deal with begonias because they'll take the drought, they'll take the wet, and anything goes. I hate planting like soldiers. I just put anything anywhere. It's a very high-maintenance garden, but I made it that way because the more time I spend out in there, the happier I am.
Her commitment to her garden is not only part of Usk's floral success, but is also responsible for transforming Marion too, and that's why I picked it.
I've always been artistic, but when I was younger, I was never encouraged to do anything with my artistic ability. So as the years went on and I started doing gardening, I guess I just brought it out in my garden. I got my confidence because I knew exactly what I was doing. So I'm a different person now from doing my garden.
All of tonight's gardens have proved that our outdoor spaces can be more than just pretty places to look at. They can work hard and enrich our lives. But my winning garden manages to do all that and more while being rollicking good fun.
Gardening in harmony with nature and encouraging wildlife is very much a contemporary trend, but you could be forgiven for thinking it all sounds really rather dull and worthy. Well, this garden in Wiltshire proves that it's anything but.
7 years ago, Nikki and Finn Spicer bought a derelict farmhouse with dreams of self-sufficiency, carbon neutrality, and the creation of a beautiful wildlife garden.
We turned a cow courtyard into a building site, and that was my focus. And then we turned a building site into a garden.
And this is what they've created. Three and a half acres of bare open fields have been transformed into a wildlife haven where the couple make organic wine from their own fruit, keep bees, and do extraordinary things with the compost heap.
One of our great passions is recycling everything, so composting is our big love, really.
Finn is a university lecturer and Nikki is a music teacher. They met just 2 years before they bought this plot, and there was even something beautifully organic about that.
I just knew it was right from the start.
And you knew as well?
Yes, totally. I liken our relationship to a compost heap. Compost is synergy. It's two elements or several elements coming together and creating something different. And Finn and my relationship is like that.
It's the first time I've heard romance between two people equated to a compost heap.
We get quite hot.
The last big self-sufficiency craze happened in the mid-70s. On TV, it was played for laughs in The Good Life. But the reality was actually a bit grimmer. Strikes, power cuts, food shortages and a doomy outlook made growing your own seem like a good option. 40 years later, the back-to-nature dream has moved on. So with ecology more of the focus, Nikki and Finn seem to have struck a balance between function and fun. The main house leads to a courtyard garden. And beyond that, the main garden itself, a wilder place where the couple have a fledgling arboretum and more wildlife-friendly features.
You made this pond as well?
Yes, that's one thing we couldn't actually do ourselves. We did quite a lot of work driving mini diggers ourselves, but this needed to be deep, so we got a big JCB in.
You got dragonflies skimming over the water, look, hawkers and darters and emperors and heaven knows what. So it's a complete magnet, really, for wildlife.
It's certainly a magnet, yes. I think anyone can make a wildlife pond. It doesn't have to be big like this, so long as you've got different levels where you can plant marginal plants and have a lot of different plants, because lots of different plants all have different characteristics and are good for different wildlife.
So don't be too landscape designery about it. Have a great swathe of something. Mix them up.
Have lots of plants, yes. And of course we can swim in the pond. We dive in off the platform there and turn around there and swim back again.
And get nibbled a bit.
And we get nibbled.
At the bottom of the garden, there are some very striking recycled objects.
Oh, we appear to be approaching Avebury. The ring of stones. Gosh, this is impressive.
They're bigger than they look because, of course, there's another 30% below ground.
Really?
Yeah.
Where did they come from?
Well, they just came from my neighbour's house. The contractor was creating foundations and these came out of the ground and he said, "Do you want these stones?" And we said, "Yes, please." I would get the arm of the digger and lift the top of the stone, lift it up, and then you'd shimmy it and then it would fall into the hole. And then they kind of stamped it in and they're quite solid. That's not going anywhere.
No, it's not. You realise when you're long gone, people are going to come in and they say, "Oh, you know, it's the same age as Stonehenge, and this is a Druid site."
Yeah.
You know.
We hope they'll think that.
Don't tell me you put it in. But I do love the hares.
This garden is full of glorious features, but Finn is desperate to introduce me to the couple's real pride and joy.
Finn, there is a disturbing light in your eye. This is clearly a passion.
It's a twinkle in my eye.
The main engine of any garden is the composter, and Finn's finely shredded heap is a work of genius.
The secret is you throw on a dusting until the colour changes, because of course the layer you're throwing on won't be as dark as the layer that you're throwing onto.
So until you can't see any brown anymore,
exactly.
You keep throwing on the green.
And then if you're using grass clippings, just enough to dust it green, don't go any deeper. Never green on green, always green on brown. And then brown on green, and then green on brown.
This feels very warm.
It is. The bacteria in there heat it up to, well, if it's got grass clippings in, it hits 70 degrees.
So how hot is this going to be now down in there?
Let's have a look.
Oh, this is exciting, isn't it? Like having your temperature taken. So it's shooting up. 60, you're knocking on 65.
Pretty soon we're going to get down so hot that you burn your hands there.
Whoosh!
It's getting a bit steamy.
You could cook in there, I mean, literally.
Well, a while ago I was thinking, what a shame there's all this heat in here. I wish we could use it.
Oh, wow. So we got a casserole dish in here.
Yes.
This is very exciting. Go pop, that's all right. Oh, look at this. Look in there. Oh, the smell, it's glorious. It has cooked. It really has. It smells divine. Fancy me how to cook brisket in your compost heap. Can we take this up to the table?
Well, I'm feeling peckish.
Finn's slow-cooked beef joint has been gently simmering for 24 hours. But does it taste any good? Say to your guests, oh, and our roast beef is fresh from the compost heap.
Oh, I like that.
Absolutely perfect.
Loving your compost heap as much as your flower beds is the mark of a real gardener. Comparing your relationship to one, on the other hand, really does take the biscuit. But here, where it's difficult to see where the garden ends and Nicky and Finn begin, it makes absolute sense.
In 50 years of gardening for a living, I've met every kind of gardener.
And seen almost every kind of garden.
Oh, that's my favourite thing, edges and straight lines. I love it.
And the thing I know for certain is that away from the grand estates,
it's the private back gardens of Britain that really tell the story of our nation's gardening obsession.
So for the first time, I'm taking you over the hedge and through the gates of Britain's regular backyards to share my 30 favourite outdoor spaces.
That is amazing.
Well, you should come when it's looking good.
I liken our relationship to a compost heap.
We get quite hot.
Whoosh! Large, small, simple, high maintenance, you name it.
These are Britain's best back gardens. The search for Britain's best gardens is taking me all over the country. I've sifted through 600 nominations to choose my personal favourites. What I'm discovering is that there are as many different types of back garden as there are people. And narrowing it down to the final 30 is a near impossible task.
But there's more to some gardens than meets the eye. They can have a greater purpose.
So in tonight's show, I'm celebrating the 10 very different gardens that do more than just look pretty. I've picked my top hard-working outdoor spaces. Private gardens that feed, entertain, and even make money. Kicking off my top 10, I'm heading to Yorkshire, and to really experience the magic of this first hard-working garden, I have to stay overnight.